I didn't hear the first knock so much as feel it, like a pulse through the wood. And in that instant I knew something outside belonged too confidently to the night to be harmless. Rain stitched the dark into one continuous sheet, a steady hiss that made the porch light bloom and fade across the peephole like a breathing eye, and I muted the TV so the real sounds could climb into the room. Two men stood shoulder to shoulder in matching rain-dark jackets, bare heads beating water, faces set to neutral in a way that felt chosen. And when the second knock landed, it wasn't a request so much as a statement of presence. I tasted dust and stale popcorn and the metallic ghost of old batteries as I stood frozen, and for a heartbeat I almost asked what they wanted, because saying something would at least make me real to myself. Instead, I did nothing, and the silence felt like standing at the lip of a well and listening for your own voice to come back. And when it didn't, I knew they heard my breathing anyway. One tilted his head at the door as if to hear the life behind it, and the other called out cheerfully that they were here to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Ian, the syllables wrong in his mouth, the timing wrong for any human visit. My name lived behind that door even if the one they used was a lie, and I pressed one finger to the peephole to cut the world into a slice, counting the rain drips on their sleeves, because numbers felt safer than choices. They didn't ring again. They leaned in, spoke a few words the storm ate, then turned with a slow, synchronized ease that made my skin pebble, like they had rehearsed this moment in someone else's doorway. No car idled, no headlights cut the dark. Nothing waited beyond the curb but a low river of gutter water and the shine of the street like oiled leather. And yet somehow they belonged here as if they had always been walking. I stood long after they were gone, watching my breath hang thin in the hall, until the clock on the wall hiccuped through a power flicker, and the house exhaled a long, tired moan that sounded almost like relief. I left the TV paused on a frozen laugh that looked like a scream when you stared long enough, and the paused faces watched me back as I slid to the kitchen, socks whispering, phone warm in my palm. The side yard is a place you never think about until footsteps choose it, and the first soft scuff against wet siding turned my spine to a tuning fork that hummed with a note I couldn't name. The gate latch clicked like a tongue against teeth, a small intimate sound that traveled through the studs and found me, and I pictured their hands gloved and practiced, their eyes on a map of my house I had never seen. I crouched by the back door just far enough to be a shadow if they glanced in, and their shapes smeared across the glass with each lightning flicker, all elbows and hoods and rain-slick impatience. Metal whispered against metal, a small exploratory scrape, then a muttered count, 1, 2, 3, and the deadbolt shuddered like a shoulder taking a hit from something heavier than it was built for. The pop felt more like a joint dislocating than a lock giving, a wet little surrender that traveled up my arms from the floorboards, and the door's weather strip peeled away with a sigh like the house had been holding its breath. Their smell came first, wet wool and cheap soap and something electric. Then the temperature fell a degree as the storm rode in on their backs, and their footsteps went forward with purpose, not curiosity. They didn't hesitate in the kitchen or search for wallets or drawers. They moved as if they knew the floor plan from the inside out, as if my house had told them where to put their feet to avoid the creaks. The stairs took their weight in slow, measured bites, and a door above me opened with a careful hand, closed with a quiet the storm couldn't copy, and then there was a silence so full it made my jaw ache. I took 3 breaths, each a thin thread that might snap if pulled, and raised my phone to dial. When the laundry room knob behind me gave a testing twitch that did not belong to the wind, and the skin between my shoulder blades turned to glass. The human ear can make an entire life out of 3 sounds on a staircase, and the first creak said wait, the second said patience, the third said intention, and every muscle in me learned a new way to be still. I pressed myself behind the laundry door, sinking into damp towels that smelled like detergent and metal, and counted heartbeats until the numbers became a language separate from fear, a chant that kept me from running. Upstairs, a chair leg dragged a few inches across cheap laminate, and a voice shaped into a whisper with a tone I'd never heard, the kind that smiles without lips. Then the house returned to a pretend sleep I didn't believe. Storms will hide a lot for you, but they don't hide your own bones knocking against each other. And I felt mine tapping a code into my ribs, a steady message that said stay small, stay soft, stay silent, stay here. The phone screen lit my hands like a lantern in a cave, the signal bar jittering between a sliver and nothing. And my text to 911 hung gray and unsent like a prayer pinned to the wrong door. I imagined the front door and the sprint to it, the cold slap of air and the slip of porch wood slicked with rain. And I pictured my ankle folding, my chin cracking, my mouth filling with pennies and shame. So I didn't run. I listened, because listening is a kind of movement that doesn't make light. And in that listening, I heard upstairs become a held breath, the kind a hunter takes when the forest finally settles. Something soft touched the laundry door again, the roundest part of a glove maybe, or the back of a hand, a caress that made less sense than a blow, and I bit my tongue hard enough to make iron flood my mouth. On the wall across from me, the TV froze a stranger's eyes in a permanent mid-blink, and in that stupid, glossy stillness I felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with screens and everything to do with choices I couldn't take back. Rain made the house hum like a cheap refrigerator, and the world shrunk to the width of a door and the length of my breath, and then a hinge upstairs tremored gently, like someone easing their weight off a bed they didn't own. The first footstep down the stairs was testing, the second was confident, the third landed right at the place I know creaks under my father's weight and never under mine, and it groaned like it recognized the wrong memory. Their steps reached the bottom and stopped a foot from where my toes curled in socks gone cold, and I felt their presence come through the seam of the door like fog, a temperature, a pressure, a woolen darkness. He tried the knob with a patience that made me feel like time had expanded, a slow clockwise persuasion that found the tiny give of the latch and learned it like a name, and the wood sighed a little. The gap opened the width of my fingernail, enough for a draft and a scent I'd never placed to slip through, enough for an eye if an eye wanted to, and I thought about how small your world gets when you are prey. Then he spoke, quiet enough to be a secret between the two of us in the storm, and his breath touched the syllables the way a hand touches a doorknob. It has already decided to turn, and he said, "He's still here." That sentence wasn't a discovery so much as a plan clearing its throat, and it made the house tilt a degree toward a future it already knew, one where I was a variable they were solving for with calm, steady math. Footsteps returned to the stairs, not hurried, not afraid, a retreat that sounded like the first half of a circle, and I pictured them in the master bedroom closing the blinds like hosts tidying up for late guests. The unsent text on my phone glowed back at me like a dare, and when the signal bar caught a bar of courage, I hit send, a little pulse that went into the rain and either found help or drowned in a puddle. Sirens are never as fast as you need them to be until you need them to be slow, and when a faint wail finally stitched itself into the storm's hiss, the house reacted like an animal pricking its ears in tall grass. Upstairs, whatever they were doing accelerated by a fraction you could feel in your fillings, and as I pressed my palm flat to the door to keep it mine, the porch boards whispered under new weight that belonged to blue light. Siren light made the curtains breathe in colors, red and blue washing the living room faces and giving the paused TV laughter a carnival cruelty, and the house suddenly had an audience it didn't want. Upstairs, the choreography tripped a little, fast steps, a quick argument like paper tearing, a low hiss with my family name in it even though he'd gotten it wrong at the door, and then a door thudded shut in a way that woke the drywall. Policed voices arrived at the back like weather with authority, boots in floodwater, radios spitting short words that sounded like new vertebrae snapping into a spine, and I stood up without permission from my legs. A hand found my shoulder and belonged to a uniform and a flashlight and the clean smell of wet nylon, and he pulled me into the garage's cold breath while the house opened its mouth and swallowed the rest of the night. The men upstairs didn't fight. They let the bodies that had practiced this house surrender to bodies that had practiced every house, and the hallway became a river you could finally stand beside and say survive to. They asked me standard questions that sounded absurd underwater. Alone, yes, parents gone for a few days, entry, back door broken, weapons, none but the kitchen knives not where they should be, and my answers felt like subtitles for someone else. One officer said the charge would likely be simple breaking and entering, like you can put language on intention the way you label a box, and I nodded, because nodding requires fewer muscles than explaining why the air still smelled like a plan. The men refused to say why, their mouths making shapes around silence with a skill that felt practiced. And when they passed me, their eyes were not the eyes of thieves who had been interrupted. They were the eyes of people who had been kept waiting. When the cars took them, the rain went back to being weather instead of a soundtrack, and the house tried to settle into its hinges, but some doors never close the same after they agree to open the wrong time. For days afterward, I walked like every floorboard had a throat I could step on, and every shadow was a person deciding not to breathe until I was a step past them, and the TV stayed off because laughter felt like a dare. It was in the bathroom that the world tried a new shape. The mirror sweating a milky film as hot water turned the room into a small white cloud I could hide in. And I watched my face come and go as if surfacing from a lake. When I swiped my palm down the glass, the streak I made revealed letters underneath. Not ink or lipstick or steam finger doodles, but a message written earlier and waiting for the right humidity to breathe. "See you when they're home," it said. The curve of the S almost pretty, the rest plain in a way that made my stomach drop, because plain words can hold knives without showing the blades. Water ran, the fan droned, the house hummed a note as if to pretend this was just a fog trick, and I stood with my toothbrush hanging like a white flag from my hand, counting the seconds the message stayed before the glass took it back. When I finally opened the door, the hall smelled like rain again, even though the storm had burned itself out before dawn. And somewhere under the wet drywall and repaired deadbolt, the house remembered the patience of men who had come to wait. I woke up to footsteps moving downstairs, steady and slow, like someone who knew where the furniture was. Rain was steady outside. The fridge hummed. Normal sounds, but the steps didn't match normal. My clock said 3:30, which means my mom shouldn't be home yet. She never gets back before 4. I clicked my lamp on low. The footsteps stopped right away, like the person didn't want to be seen. The silence after that felt obvious. Somebody was there, listening for me like I was listening for them. I opened my door a crack and looked down the hall. It felt longer than usual, all dark. No light from downstairs, which was wrong. My mom always turns on the hall light first thing. I slid my feet so the second stair wouldn't squeal. One hand on the rail. Slow breaths through my nose. The living room looked untouched. Blanket on the couch. Controller on the table. TV remote where I left it. If this was a burglary, why not touch the big stuff? Why walk the whole house in the dark? The air near the kitchen felt colder. It smelled like wet jacket and outside air. I whispered, "Mom?" Once. It died in the dark. No answer, no movement. Then I saw it. One wet shoe print on the kitchen tile. Clear tread, pointing inward, not to a door. I followed it slow, heel first, so the tile wouldn't squeak. The wall clock ticked louder with every step, like it wanted me to turn around and go back. I stepped into the dining room arch and froze hard. A man sat at the head of our table. Hood up, dark mask on, hands under the table. He didn't talk. He didn't jump. He just watched me like he'd been waiting for me to walk in. My phone felt heavy and wet in my hand. My mouth wouldn't work. My eyes wouldn't leave his mask. He turned his head a little, slow, careful. Whatever was under that table didn't move at all. I stepped back once, then again. He stayed still, eyes locked. I knew the answer without asking. He wasn't here for the TV. He wasn't here for me. I eased out of the archway, and then I ran. No plan, just speed up the stairs. Door shut. Lock turned, dresser dragged, phone to my ear. I whispered, "There's a masked man in my dining room." Downstairs, a slow set of steps crossed the living room toward the bottom of my staircase, and stopped. I kept my shoulder into the door and whispered to 911. The operator stayed calm and told me officers were on the way. I barely heard her because the steps started again. Not fast, just steady. Living room to hall. Hall to the bottom of the stairs. Then nothing. No voice. No breathing I could pick up. Just weight in the house that wasn't mine. I pressed my ear to the door. For 10 long seconds I heard nothing at all. Then the front door opened. Hinges groaned. Cold air slid under my door. I told the operator he left. She told me to stay put anyway. I believed it for maybe 30 seconds. My hands started to shake less, then I heard 3 slow steps on the staircase. Not up, just 3. Then still, that was worse than running. It meant he'd never left at all. The floor under the dresser gave a small vibration. He was right below me. I covered my mouth with my hand so my breathing wouldn't give me away. The house sounded like it was holding its breath with me. 30 more seconds, a minute. I counted in my head and tried not to move. Red and blue lights finally flashed across my wall. The front door slammed again. Boots, radios, voices calling out clear. They moved room to room fast, then hit the stairs. When they reached me, I backed the dresser away and opened up. We went room by room together, but the house was empty. No intruder. No mask. No weapon on the table or floor. The only thing they pointed out was faint glove smudges on my mom's bedroom doorknob. That was worse than finding nothing. It told a story I didn't like. I said he sat at the table. I said he never rushed. I said he waited. They took notes and told me to lock everything and call again if anything changed. The officers left. The house went quiet. My mom got home right after. We locked the doors twice, then a third time, because it felt better to overdo it. A neighbor offered door cam footage. We watched together at the kitchen table. At about 3:27, a hooded figure walked up our path. He paused, leaned in like he was listening, then moved out of frame toward the side door. We watched the clip again more slowly. Same pause, same turn, same walk. No bag, no tools, no smash and grab. Just calm steps like a person with a schedule. My mom went quiet and said she had felt watched at her bus stop that week. Same build, same stillness, same kind of stare that tries to pass as nothing. It lined up with what I saw in the dining room. A man waiting, not searching. We checked the house again in daylight. Nothing missing. The glove smudges on her doorknob were real though, and they told the rest. He wasn't here for electronics. He wasn't here to rush the place. He came minutes early and took the head of the table to wait for my mom to walk in. I just happened to wake up and get in the way. We changed locks and set up more cameras the same day. I kept replaying the shoe print on the kitchen tile in my head. It pointed into the house, not out. It pointed to the dining room on purpose. That's the part that sticks. He sat to watch the hallway and the front door. He wanted to be the first thing my mom saw. Night came back. We left the hall light on. The house made every normal noise and each one felt like a test. I lay on top of the covers with my shoes near the bed and my phone in my hand. Just after midnight, my mom's phone lit the ceiling. 1 text, no name, 5 words. Wasn't the right time. We sent it to the detective and logged everything. No second text followed, no call, no demand. Just that one line sitting in our heads like a chair at the end of a table. Since then, we start our nights with doors checked, cameras checked, and a plan. And when I picture the dining room, the first thing I see is a man in a mask sitting still, like he's patient enough to wait again.